Welcome to the show. Got a great show. We've got our first guest on the show. We're going to be welcoming in momentarily Jordan Schultz. Get to him in a second. We'll be talking about a lot of the most recent news, injury information around the league that you guys need to know. We also are going to be talking about a lot of coaching issues around the NFL this weekend. I was noticing as I'm watching these games and figuring out what I want to discuss with you guys. Some weeks are going to be more focused on stats, the film, deep dives into plays, situations, tendencies that teams are either taking advantage of or not. But certainly this week, there was a lot of issues with the coaching, and I'm going to break down those. I'm going to show you some of the tape momentarily. We're going to be getting into that. I want to remind you, of course, first of all, thanks for joining me here. Noon Eastern Tuesday recap show, early look ahead to the upcoming game. We are rolling out our strength of schedule. We have just launched the strength of schedule model over at Sharp Football Analysis. Now that we've got 4 weeks of good data in there, I feel very comfortable looking at strength of schedule to help predict the future, to help prognosticate things moving forward. And we're going to be sharing some of the strength of schedule information with you and looking at it through a week 5 lens as we look ahead to what teams were dealing with in the past that now have something else in week 5. It's going to be great to get into that momentarily. So with that said, I want to dig into our first topic before we welcome in Jordan Schultz, and that's what is going on with the Houston Texans. All right. There is only one team that runs the ball more than it passes on second and long situations this season. And I want you to take a second to guess which team that might be. You probably want to start by thinking about a team with a bad quarterback, a team with a coaching staff that doesn't trust their passer very much, a team that probably has a very strong run game in order to make those run plays make sense. After all, why would a team run the ball so much on second and long unless it was productive? Have a guess? Well, I'll tell you right now, you're wrong. Because that team has a great quarterback. His name is C.J. Stroud, and they have the 24th ranked rushing attack. And yet, in the first half of games, the Houston Texans are running the ball on roughly 60% of their second and long plays. Now, this is absolutely ridiculous when you look at how efficient those runs are. The average rushing efficiency for the NFL on these types of runs is much better than what the Houston Texans are delivering. They're averaging 29% success rate. They're averaging 2.0 yards per carry. They're averaging minus 0.59 EPA per rush. These are all bottom 10 metrics on second and long situations. And yet, as you can imagine, this is having a major impact on the team's first half efficiency. 28% of the Texans' first half downs, 28% of the Texans' first downs are leading to third and longs in the first half of games. Third and long, that's 27th in the NFL. Over the course of the entire game, 29% of first downs are leading to third and longs. That ranks 30th. Only the Browns and Giants are worse. Their average distance to first down on third down is 9.3 yards, which ranks worst in the NFL. They rank 10th worst on early down success rate. They are not bypassing third downs very often, and there is no excuse for this. They have a quarterback named C.J. Stroud. They added weapons to their offense this offseason. Their offensive line has been healthy, which it wasn't last year. They rank above average in pass protection. I was talking to a good friend of mine and asked him why the Texans offense doesn't seem to look the same as it did last year. It sort of looks like it's actually taken a step back. I know that they are 3-1, but their 3 wins have been by a combined 12 points and all have been one-score nail-biters. And not a single one of those wins has been versus a team with a winning record. The 0-4 Jaguars, Anthony Richardson, and Caleb Williams are their teams that they have beaten. My biggest fear with the Texans entering the season was Bobby Slowick. The way that he called plays, the way that he sets his team up on these second and long situations and third and long situations by his tendency to run the ball unproductively was a big fear of mine entering the season. And through 4 weeks of the season, it's come to fruition. He needs to figure out a way to get this straightened out because the Texans are a far too good of a team to be so dumb in that they inefficiently are running the ball at the highest rate in the NFL on second and longs and face the longest distance to go on third down on average as a result. Got to get cleaned up, Bobby Slowick. No excuse for this. The run game is not good enough to handle this type of play calling. Running the ball on over 60% of second and longs is absolutely mind-boggling for any team in the NFL, let alone a team with a quarterback as good as CJ Stroud. So that one, to me, was just crippling. And that's why I say that this rushing attack and this play calling is absolutely crippling the Houston Texans. All right, we're going to be bringing Jordan on here momentarily. But before we do that, greetings from the UK. Yes, greetings. Tyree trade rumor to the Chiefs. I'm actually going to talk to Jordan about that. I'm interested to discuss that with Jordan momentarily because I was thinking of this similar type of thing that I think couldn't possibly and never possibly would happen. But I'm curious to get his take on that because it is of interest and intrigue to me. Okay, next up, though, I do want to get into our next topic, which I think you'll find extremely interesting if you were betting on this game, if you have anything related to a win total with regard or division future with regard to the NFC South, because there was a game that happened this weekend, which was extremely mind-boggling to me, the way that this final part of this game unfolded. So let's dig into that, Matt. Let's bring up the next topic. All right. The late game situation here for the Atlanta Falcons was insanity to me as I'm watching this thing unfold. And there's two key things that you need to keep in mind as we go ahead and break down these plays. The first thing, the Falcons are losing by only 1 point. All they need is a field goal. That's all. The second thing, their kicker has never made a field goal longer than 54 yards. Your goal has to be get into field goal range that's comfortable for your kicker. That's it. It's the whole goal of this next drive. So I want to pick it up here. Let's discuss the Atlanta Falcons final drive, Matt.
Game reset. We are down by 1 score. There is 31 seconds left in the game. We need a field goal. A field goal will win the game. We're at our own 30. We need a chunk play. Let's get a chunk play right now, Kirk. Drops back, fires it. Thankfully, a nice back shoulder throw results in a spot foul, pass interference. We're going to get the ball at the Saints' 40-yard line. We are 40 yards away, but we don't need to get 40 yards. We just need to get into field goal range. There's only 23 seconds left. We are down by 1 score. The ball is at their 40-yard line. Our kicker has never made a field goal past 54 yards. This would be a career long for him. We need to just get a few yards, get inside the green. We've got a couple downs to do it, 23 seconds left. Drop back on first down. Why are we throwing the ball to the 16-yard line? We don't need a touchdown. We just need a few yards. What are we doing? Okay, we're going to get smarter here. Second down, we're just going to get a few yards, run out of bounds here, pick up a few yards. What are we doing? Dropping back. We are firing this down to the 4-yard line. It almost gets tipped by the Saints player. We're going for a touchdown here. We just need a few yards. Our kicker has never made a field goal this long. We have one more down to get a couple of yards, 5-10 yards maybe. What are we going to do? What? He almost intercepted, but if our player catches this, do you know where he is? He's in bounds. The game is over. We have no timeouts. The guy's laying on top of him. He would have been in bounds. So now we're forcing our kicker to kick a 58-yard field goal attempt. He has never made one in his career above 54 yards. Thankfully, he is up to the task and makes it, and we win the game. What are we doing, though?
I was just absurd. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys picked up on that as you're watching the game, but this is between the head coach and the offensive coordinator play caller. In this case, they're different individuals, obviously. Some teams, the head coach is the play caller. But there's no excuse for this. This could have cost the Atlanta Falcons a win. And if you guys know how difficult it is to get a win in the NFL and how valuable a win is, having worked with teams before as consultant to multiple teams that have had success and have gone far into the postseason, wins are so important to stack early in the year to set you up for the best situation from a playoff perspective to either get a first round bye or to have that home field advantage. And you cannot overlook or take for granted any type of win, no matter when it occurs in the season. And it's just mind boggling that a team would take that type of strategy. Notice, after that defensive pass interference call that set the ball on the 40-yard line, the Atlanta Falcons ran 3 plays and gained 0 yards. 3 plays and no yardage whatsoever, and forced their kicker to kick from that yard mark. Now, of course, you don't want to take a sack, but you have to do something better than gaining no yards and forcing your kicker to kick that long of a field goal, 4 yards beyond his career long to date. Insanity. Okay, as we wait for Jordan, let's go ahead and talk about the Steelers. Matt, cue up that topic. All right. The Pittsburgh Steelers were another team. I'm saying that they might be the dumbest team to lose. The Falcons were the dumbest team to win. Fortunately, they got that win. And you're right, Nico. The Falcons did get a bit lucky with that win. Ian says most coaches do struggle with situational coaching. There's no doubt about it, but there's also no excuse for it, Ian. There's no excuse for it. These coaches get paid a lot of money. These teams are worth billions of dollars. They have to have better ways of organizing situational football. And I have been a firm believer, and I've suggested this to GMs and head coaches behind the scenes about their coaches taking stress training, the type of training that the military offers, so that you can make critical and very important decisions in the heat of the moment. When there's tons of stress, there's tons of pressure, you don't have much time to think. You have to figure out a way, and there's training that you could take to calm your body, block out all the external noise, and go back to figuring out what needs to be the right decision here, how to process and make the right decision in a moment of massive stress and very little time to make that decision. That could, in the field of battle, it's life and death. On the football field, it's your job potentially on the line. And there's no reason that coaches are not spending more time with that. In addition, I mean, most of you guys know playing Madden. I've encouraged that as well in the off season. Play Madden. That it's the repetition of the training that gets you better prepared to be in the moment and making the right decisions when you're actually in charge of those during a game where you don't have any do-overs, you don't have any redos or anything along those lines. And that's why sometimes, and people laugh about this, but a lot of times it's the sports bettors and it's the gamblers who are better at understanding these situations than the coaches. And that's because we, with a lot at stake, watch the endings of so many of these games super closely. And we're seeing these decisions all around the league every single week, 16 games a week when there's no buys. And we're focused intently on these things. The coaches are watching their game. They go back and watch the cut-ups of their opponent. They're not watching all the rest of the league make these decisions and all the other coaches and what they're doing and where they made mistakes and what they did that was successful. They're not watching any of that in the late game situations. We have so much more experience understanding these situations than they do. And it's people think that that's funny, but when you realize the situation and what the coaches are focusing on, it's a little bit more obvious. Now, they should be hiring somebody who is specializing and who's focusing on that. And why more of them don't and why more of them continue to make these mistakes is just completely ridiculous. So, Ian, I don't disagree with you, but I'm not excusing them whatsoever. That's a disaster. Pittsburgh Steelers. This is another one of those late game situations that this one's pretty obvious. This isn't as below the surface as it was with the Atlanta Falcons. So let's walk through this. This simply comes down to whether or not you know how to manage a game. Matt, why don't you roll that video?
All right, let's talk through the ending of this Steelers-Colts game. Let's reset this. They're at the 2-minute timeout. Steelers are down by 3. A field goal will tie it. They have only one timeout left. It's 2nd and 1. So at this 2-minute timeout, you're calling 2 plays. You're calling the first play is going to get you the first down on the short yardage situation. Then you're going to get back on a moving clock to the line of scrimmage and run the second play that's going to try to pick up another first down. You don't have time to waste. The clock will be moving after you pick this up. So short yardage play, first down. Everybody's back to the line of scrimmage quickly. There were no deep routes run. Easy to get your next snap off. You get aligned. And disaster. I don't know why it was taking them so long to get the snap off. I'm not sure Justin Fields wasn't looking. You call your timeout right now. You have a timeout. 1 minute and 38 seconds left when he was sacked. You call that timeout. Now you're at 2nd and 22. Justin Fields has no idea what's going on. He doesn't know the play yet. He still doesn't know it. Finally, he hears it. He holds up 4 fingers. Finally, he hears it. 4 fingers, like a 4 verts concept here. They get the ball snapped with 1:14. He fires it down the field. Now, George Pickens actually had this guy beat. So if it was a better pass, it might have been a touchdown. George Pickens kept running. But regardless, now it's 3rd and 22 on a stopped clock. So, of course, you're not using your timeout here. But I do not know why they would not call that timeout and just reset everything before 2nd and 22 and figure out a strategy. Because if you do that, you would probably be able to remind your players that they got to get out of bounds because we are not going to be utilizing another timeout. So you got to the line of scrimmage on 3rd and 22. Let's see what play they got. Justin Fields scrambling, throws it short. Again, obviously a massive mistake. You've got to get out of bounds there. You got 53 seconds left. You're now 4th and 11. I do not understand why there's not a timeout taken here with 53 seconds left. You're getting to the line of scrimmage. The commentators are saying you save it before you kick the field goal. If you don't get a good play off here, you're not going to even get another down. And sure enough, they scramble and don't get a good play off, and the game is over. Mike Tomlin still has his timeout, and it does nothing for the team. Absolutely nothing for the team. After the game, Tomlin said that he thought it was more beneficial to have a running clock to call the play because then the opposing team wouldn't have things sorted out. That's interesting. It's clearly the Steelers didn't have things sorted out. Play calls were not great. The execution was terrible. And you take your timeout back home with you on the flight back to Pittsburgh. Do not understand why you're not calling a timeout there. Do not understand how it's not ingrained in your players' heads that they have to get out of bounds. Just poor execution by the coaching staff, by the Tomlin himself with his usage of the timeout, and obviously by the team.
And look, if you don't believe that Mike Tomlin actually said that he thinks it's to his advantage for them not to use a timeout and just run around out there trying to get it organized on key situations with the running clock, 2nd and 22, 4th and 11, running clock, key downs that you need to gain chunk yardage on. Take a listen to what he actually said at the press conference, because I'm not lying. Roll that, Matt.
I just wanted to hold it in my hip pocket. Sometimes working at pace is advantage for an offense. It doesn't give the defense an opportunity to get specialized people in the game, to ponder calls and get imperfect calls. And, I was comfortable working at pace, and I just wanted to keep it in our hip pocket in case we converted and got down the field.
I mean, what I would have then asked the coach if I was in that press conference is what data does he have that supports this thought of his that it's better to work at pace and not actually get the best play call in and save time? Because I think he's just throwing shit against the wall. I think he's making up stuff because he cost himself the game. He didn't call the timeout. I'm not suggesting that if he calls the timeout, they win the game. I'm simply saying he cost himself the game by not calling that timeout. They had bad play calls that got in the game as a result of being in a hurry-up mode on 2nd and 22 and on 4th and 11. Those were the two plays with the running clock that they had to hurry up and get plays called, and neither of those plays were successful at all. Neither of those plays had any success. As you saw, that third down play with the stopped clock where they could actually get something a little bit more thoughtful into the game, they did gain a chunk of 10 yards. But on the running clock where they were scrambling, 0 yards, 2 incompletions on both of those plays. So, I mean, Mike Tomlin can say whatever he wants to after the fact to try to defend his decision. None of us should be buying that crap. Is absolutely absurd. And of course, they have the extra timeout in their pocket. I know a number of Steelers fans who were extremely upset and disappointed with the way that game ended. Now, again, this is not to say the Steelers were the right side in that game, but that was just a ridiculous way to end that game. Okay, I want to hit a couple of topics. We're not seeing, this is the benefit or the drawback of being live. We're not seeing Jordan in here. So I do want to hit a couple of topics that we were going to discuss with Jordan. Matt, why don't you take us to the next one? Okay, I want to talk a little bit about Doug Pederson here. And some of his comments after the game. Doug Pederson. Oh, we have Jordan here. All right, we got Jordan. Let's go ahead and let me welcome in Jordan Schultz, the first guest from outside the Sharp Football family. One of the top NFL insiders in the world. Jordan has broken stories across the league, obviously, and is one of the most connected guys in the industry. Has an extremely spectacular bookshelf there as well, Jordan. Welcome into the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, bro. Sorry, just
totally understandable. We're really appreciative of you being able to join the show, and it's looking good. Your picture is showing up pretty nicely there.
great.
I'm going to have my producer play some of the comments from Doug Pederson after the game, and I want to get your take on what he said. So, Matt, why don't you roll that clip of Doug Pederson after the game?
Is there any chance you take the headset over just to change this thing up?
For what? I thought he called a great game. We as coaches, we can't go out there and make the plays, right? It's a two-way street. So, you guys can sit here and point the finger all you want, and that's fine. Point it right at me. I can take it. Okay? I can take it. So, whatever you want to ask me, say, whatever, write, go ahead.
You did tell us at your introductory news conference a couple of years ago, if it's not working, if it's not in rhythm, whether it's your plays or not, that you hand off the play calling. Is it just one of those, maybe it's just a voice, a confidence? You guys were cooking when you were doing it, it looked like in 22.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll take it into consideration.
Okay, anything else?
So, Jordan, what is your take on what's going on behind the scenes with the Jacksonville Jaguars? We know that when Doug first got there, he was calling the plays. Then last year, I think there was a little bit of Doug's calling some of the plays. His OC is calling some of the plays. This year, it sounds like his OC is calling all of the plays. He's getting very defensive, but then he also clearly throws Trevor Lawrence and the rest of the team under the bus there from an execution perspective to save his play callers' hide, so to speak. What do you think about that situation down there in Jacksonville right now?
So there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, I thought what he said as a modern day NFL coach to blame the players, Warren, it just doesn't work. Okay. It does not work. That's the wrong approach. And frankly, I don't think Doug Pederson has done a very good job. They've lost 9 out of 10 games. The offseason, they paid a ton of dudes, including Trevor Lawrence. And now things are not working, right? You're 0-4. You've blown a couple games. You probably should have won at least 2 of those. And if you look forward, if they lose again, then in 2 weeks, they go to London, which is a de facto home game for them, and Shad Khan, their owner. They're going to play 2 games there across the pond. And if they're winless, that is incredibly embarrassing. They fired the OC last year, the DC last year. All of the onus is now falling on Doug Pederson. And I hate to unload on a coach, but to me, this warrants unloading. This is a franchise that is completely rudderless, a GM that to me has no synergy with the head coach, and a head coach again in Doug Pederson who is going to be the scapegoat. You know, it really could not be worse in Jacksonville. The roster right now is built to win. The way they have structured it, the way they paid guys, offensively, defensively, Armstead, Campbell, Lawrence, Burns, Allen, Hines Allen. I just don't see any scenario where this is going to get better. And if you're Doug Pederson, a Super Bowl winning coach, Warren, you need to look in the mirror, in my opinion, and take responsibility. I'll leave you with this. I've talked to a few guys in that locker room over the last 2 weeks, not just the Texans game, but the last couple weeks. And they've told me that that locker room is gone in regards to the head coach. So when I hear that, I hear, again, a team and a franchise that is absolutely rudderless.
Wow, gone, that locker room is gone. That's a huge quote there, Jordan. And if you look, it's going to get more difficult than it gets easier. I'm looking at their schedule from the 2024 football preview. You have your own copy of this as well that I sent you, but you're looking at this team and who they play. They do have a couple of relatively easier opponents, but after that, week 8, after they get back from that 2-week trip overseas, Green Bay Packers, Philadelphia Eagles, Minnesota Vikings, and Detroit Lions in a 4-week span. They are playing 3 of the top teams from the NFC North, plus the Philadelphia Eagles before they go on bye. Then they come back and they take on the Houston Texans. They still have a game with the New York Jets later on in the season. This is a daunting schedule. It was one of the more difficult schedules entering the year, and this is different than what the Jacksonville Jaguars tend to face. They tend to face easier schedules playing down in the AFC South. It's one of the reasons I bet their adjusted win total under. I just think that the Jacksonville Jaguars team, I felt that they were in trouble before the season started, but that is a wild quote there.
Just to be clear, I'm referencing the head coach, Warren, and the players. Like the locker room in regards to him is gone. That's just to be totally clear, based on what I've been told. Which means that if you have a head coach that doesn't have the buy-in with the players, especially after an 0-4 start with high expectations, and the owner saying this is the best team we've ever had, it's obviously not good.
Yeah, no, it's not good at all. And the thing that makes me the most frustrated about that situation is this who Trevor Lawrence is, or could Trevor Lawrence be somebody different with different coaching? Because right now they paid him obviously a ton of money, and when you look at the data, and Trevor Lawrence is struggling way more than he should. We talked about it on last week's show, under pressure. When he's pressured, he goes into a goose egg, and the problem with that is, he's a tall guy. He's got that pedigree. He's the prototypical pocket quarterback who also is mobile. He should not be as fragile as he is performing when he's being pressured. Tells me that they're not building in the right amount of answers. I know the offensive line hasn't been great, Jordan, but there's other issues there with them in terms of giving him outlets to get rid of the football when pressure is coming, and they're just not doing that right now. I want to turn the page to a bigger market team, and that's the New York Jets. We saw after this Jets game, there was a little back and forth here between a tete-a-tete between Robert Saleh and Aaron Rodgers regarding the cadence. Matt, if you can first play the Robert Saleh clip, and then we'll go into the Aaron Rodgers response.
This was an issue last year, though, Robert. Last year, I think you guys were 1 or 2 in the NFL in penalties. Now this year, I think you're 4. I mean, what needs to change to clean it up?
Well, we got to figure it out. Whether or not we're good enough to handle all the or ready to handle all the cadence. Cadence had not been an issue all camp. Felt like our operation had been operating pretty good. Obviously, today it took a major step back.
The cadence specifically, Robert said that might be something you guys have to dial back a little bit. Is that something you think could potentially help the situation?
It's one way to do it. The other way is hold them accountable. I mean, we haven't had an issue. We've had 1 false start. Morgan had 1 false start, I believe, until this. So, it's been a weapon. We use it every day in practice. We don't, we rarely have a false start. And to have, 5 today, it seemed like, 4 or 5. Yeah, it seems like an outlier. I don't know if we need to make mass changes based on, kind of an outlier game.
So obviously, if I'm, this is the funny part that I think about some of these coaches, Jordan, when they say things like this. You're Robert Saleh. Imagine if you're going up against Aaron Rodgers and you're preparing your defense to play Aaron Rodgers on the other side of the football. If you know that Aaron Rodgers isn't doing any of his cadence tricks, isn't going up tempo, trying to draw you off sides, anything like that, I guarantee as a defensive coach, you're feeling a lot better about your defense. But when you see him on the other side of the ball, you have to coach up your players. You have to remind them all day. You have to practice it in practice, not to jump off sides because of these free plays. And I think he leads the NFL in history, NFL history in most free play touchdowns. And so when you have to prepare a ton for that. So for Saleh to then say, well, look, this is a problem. We might need to dial this back. This might not be working. Is just the most short-sighted view of this, and a view that he would never take if he's on the other side. So that's what I always encourage coaches to say. Put yourself on the other side of the football. What would you want that other team to be doing? And think about that before you make the comments that you're making, because these really don't make a whole lot of sense to me. What is your vibe from what's going on inside that building, inside the locker room? The Jets now sit at 2-2. They travel overseas this week to play the first international game of the season there, well, outside of Brazil, week 1. What is your take on the New York Jets right now?
Well, one of Aaron Rodgers' many superpowers is his ability to execute the free play. He has 18 free play touchdowns throughout his career, which is the most in NFL history. Throughout the first 3 games, they only committed, I'm looking at it right now, 1 false start. Against Denver, they had 3 false starts. The weather was bad. Denver's defense is legit. Patrick Surtain's the best corner in football. So it was not a clean game. And Rodgers said afterward, obviously the weather wasn't good, but he took some onus saying that he didn't make, great throws. He was disappointed in himself. He wanted more from himself. Robert Saleh, if this is going to last and be successful, which I think it can be, there has to be that trust. Now the Jets are 2-2. They knew this wasn't going to be perfect and all rosy and peaches from the beginning. But there has been, to me, some real progress, especially they win those 2 in a row. I know New England wasn't a juggernaut, but I thought they discovered a lot in that game. And to me, when I think about what they want to do, running the ball with Braylon Allen and Breece Hall, throwing the football with Garrett Wilson, and obviously the connection that Rodgers has with Lazard, this is an offense that I think is going to be really good. They lose Morgan Moses. I reported he's only going to be out a couple of weeks, which is great news. I thought Fasciano did well as a rookie, but this is still a team learning what its quarterback wants to do. Again, there has to be trust. And if Robert Saleh is going to be the type of head coach that is going to empower his players, which I always thought he was, you have to empower your ultimate guy, your franchise, which is Aaron Rodgers. And I think he's still figuring out, Aaron is, what he can and what he can't do. And I thought, again, against New England, he was able to roll out. He was 6 of 6 with basically 52 yards and a touchdown, moving the pocket in that game. And that, to me, told me he was feeling better and more comfortable. Then you look at Denver, none of that happens. I have to chop some of that up to the weather. And again, I think Denver's defense is pretty suffocating. So I want to see more, but I still believe in what this team can be, especially in that division.
Yeah, that division right now with the Miami Dolphins in their current state, we just saw them last night, did not look good whatsoever. This division is certainly wide open at 2-2. We knew that their schedule was going to be not too difficult early, but they did survive the 3 games in 10 days situation that the NFL gave them early on in the season. That was a rough one. You're right. The Denver Broncos, a much better defense, I thought, than I anticipated entering the season. And they're going to be causing a lot more problems for other teams. It's going to be really interesting, Jordan, when we get to the Denver versus Kansas City game. And I guess let's pivot into that real quick. What do you see in terms of the Chiefs trying to replace Rashee Rice? Is there anything that this team is going to be able to do in the trade market to bring in another weapon? Because a lot of, I was on the Rashee Rice receiving over 2 weeks ago, and that hit with ease. And Rashee Rice is running a lot of the Travis Kelce routes. Travis Kelce turns 35 this week. He's getting a little bit older, hasn't been as impactful. Certainly, they're going to end up ratcheting up the Travis Kelce usage, but there's only so much that Travis Kelce is going to be able to deliver, especially, see, to me, this is a very different Chiefs team than it was a few years ago, even in that their sight is squarely set on three-peat or bust, in my opinion. And it was that way from the start of the season. They loaded up. They had the weapons entering the season to, in my opinion, get there and have that three-peat. But now that they are down, so many guys, Marquise Brown, Rashee Rice, key contributors that were going to take a lot of the target share. I just think that this offense becomes back compressed, not as explosive. Xavier Worthy aside, you're going to get some big plays from him once in a while, but where does this team turn? What have you been hearing about what the Chiefs might do offensively here?
Yeah, it's so unfortunate that they have been decimated. You mentioned Hollywood and obviously Rashee Rice, obviously as well, Isaiah Pacheco. I mean, they really you things from an injury standpoint could not have gone worse, and yet here they are 4-0. This is a team built on winning 3 in a row. They've gone all in the way they should. I think they have a tremendous GM in Brett Veach, but they have to figure out exactly what it is with the ACL, or is it not an ACL? The belief has been that it is the torn ACL, but they won't know for sure until next week when they can get all the proper information. And once they do that, then they can identify what they need, moving forward, depending on what the ultimate prognosis is. But to me, it's not necessarily something that would happen right away from a trade perspective, but I think what you're looking at, if I'm a betting man, considering how much, to your point, Warren, this team is in on winning 3 in a row, that historic three-peat that's never happened. If I was a betting man, I would imagine that as we get closer to the deadline, which we know is pushed back into November this year, as we get closer to the deadline, that Kansas City would ultimately make a move. But I think, again, they really need to make sure they know exactly what Rashee Rice's injury is. They'll have clarity on that next week. And then they can maybe have a couple games, figure out what is necessary, what is needed before making a move. But I think they probably need to, considering, to your point, Travis Kelce in his mid-30s. They're able to weather the storm at running back, right? With P. Ryan, with Kareem Hunt, but ultimately at receiver, right now, other than Xavier Worthy, they are missing. So they're going to probably, in my mind, need to make a move. I just don't know exactly when that would be.
Yeah, this is going to be probably the dumbest idea, but the thought did cross my brain.
The Tyreek Hill thing?
Yes. What at like 3:15 a.m. last night?
Someone suggested that. Who was it on social? Was it Matt Berry? I saw who originally said that, to bring him back.
Yeah, look, I don't know what the collusion rules are within the league and those types of things. The fantasy world is a lot different from a trades perspective, but this does seem like a fantasy idea. It's like the Dolphins aren't going anywhere with Tua this year. We don't even know when he's coming back. He says he wants to come back, and I don't want to dig into that topic right now because it's a lot of speculation unless you have some info there that you want to share with us. But otherwise, we don't know what's going to happen with Miami. And I hinted, weeks ago, as soon as he got injured, and I did a video on this, that this offense cannot be run or executed by anybody else like Tua.
You're right.
Because of the way that Tua utilizes play action and his quick release and still pushes the ball down the field. There's just nobody else who can throw with that anticipation that's anywhere close to this. And we've seen this offense just look disastrous without him. So that offense is going nowhere. That team is going nowhere. And Kansas City is all in on winning this third Super Bowl, becoming the first team to ever do that. In what world would they sacrifice a bunch of their future, 26, 27 picks to try to go after a guy under the estimation that what if there's a world where they would give him back to Miami? I have no idea how that would work.
I love the idea in theory, of course, but I don't see a scenario where Kansas City brings back Tyreek Hill. I don't see that happening. And I think Miami is still holding out hope that at some point Tua is going to come back this season and be reinvigorated and healthy. So also Miami still needs to figure out from a timing perspective. So if Tua has a couple more weeks on IR and they believe he can come back, they hope he can come back, then they're obviously going to try to make that work before even considering that. But I don't see a world, A, where Kansas City brings him back, and B, where Miami considers trading Tyreek Hill. I mean, at his core with Tua, he's arguably the best most dangerous receiver in football, and I don't think the Dolphins are ready to give up on that.
No, exactly. That's why I was thinking like it would be awesome if somehow for the first time ever there was like a 1-year loan out, just loan him
Kind of
to
like
the Chiefs.
right in European football, a little loan action. You listen, you play for Man City. We're going to loan you to Fulham. We're going to loan you to Tottenham for a year, and then we bring you back.
Exactly. We'll trade you back. You'll still wind up like the bulk of the deal. We'll give you so many picks in exchange for it. We'll give you favorable terms in the return, but we're just using this to try to get one more Super Bowl. It's not going to impact you because you might get better draft picks as a result of not having him on your roster.
What I'm hearing, Warren, is we need to restructure the CBA to fit more of the European soccer situation.
Exactly. And here's another, that's a great segue, Jordan, because here's something else that I'd like to restructure with regard to the CBA. Maybe you can tell me what's going on with this. We are seeing on Wednesdays, I think it's Wednesdays, all these fines get announced by the league office for all these player violations and infractions that we're not talking about like he wore too many wristbands or like he wore tape all over his face mask. He didn't have the right colored socks on. We're not talking about things like that. We're talking about things that potentially are against the rules that should be penalties during the game. That to me, the league is scared of actually enforcing the proper rules and throwing those flags. And they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They don't want all the fans out there to be complaining about the flags that are being thrown during the telecast, but they just want to go back and fine these players a boatload of money afterwards to make themselves their pocketbooks richer while making the game seem like there's not quite as many penalties. And to me, that's absurd on Roger Goodell's part to think that this is okay. And it needs to be called out and addressed why they think it's okay to reach into these players' pocketbooks for things that if it's an actual flag, if it's an actual penalty, then it should be flagged as such during the game. What is going on with this? I'm seeing this way more this season than I did any other year in the past.
You're seeing a lot of fines on Saturdays, which is a college football day, which means the NFL fans aren't necessarily paying attention to it. It's before Sunday where, like if it happened during the week, we would, as fans, we'd be much more attuned to it. But because it's on a Saturday, it's hidden. I tell you where it's not hidden: the players' checkbooks. I cannot tell you how many players I've talked to who are saying, "Why am I getting fined for something that didn't really occur during a game?" It's really, really frustrating for these guys who are these are gladiators. These are modern day gladiators. They're putting their bodies out on the line. There's non-guaranteed contracts. I have talked at length about how backwards it is that the NFL has non-guaranteed contracts, and the NBA, for example, which I love, has guaranteed contracts. The NBA is a players' league. The NFL is an owner-driven league. The NFL has so much more power from an ownership perspective than the NBA does, which is really a voice of the players, right? So I think the helmet has always been a big issue for fans connecting to guys. I've always said that regardless whether you're wearing a Guardian cap or whatever, the bottom line is, unless you're a quarterback, it's really, really hard for fans to connect to players. I think there is a super disconnect when it comes to these fines. I could not agree more. It's not something I've really dug into a lot, but I have talked to guys who are really irritated with the fact that maybe they're not flagged during a game, and then all of a sudden they get a fine for 10, 25K on a Saturday. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. We don't even really know where the money's going. And to me, it's unfortunate that it happens. And I think it's on purpose that it happens on a weekend before the games so that we don't really care. But it does matter.
Great point. And trying to hide it, I said, under the cover of darkness. They're shoving it into Saturday during the college football, just like you said. It's sickening to me. And I know you've got so many player connections, and I thought that you would have some good personal experience with the players reaching out to you on that. This needs to get called out, and it needs to stop. If these are actual penalties, then they need
should
to
be
flagged as
100%.
such. Exactly. During the game, they need to be flagged. And if they're not penalties, stop finding the guys afterwards. They tried to bring in this hip drop tackle. The NFL does this all the time, Jordan. And it really pisses me off. They come in like with the 3 games in 10 days thing, right? They got rid of that entirely, but then they had to go back to it so they could get these games on a Wednesday. For the first time in years, they wanted to put the Christmas Day games on a Wednesday, so they had to do the 3 and 10. And they're like, okay, well, that now opens the door again to us giving so many other teams around the league 3 games in 10 days now. And so they started introducing that after not having that for a decade or so, because it wasn't as safe on the players to play the many games in such short of a time frame. They're doing the same type of thing here. Oh, we're going to, instead of actually calling this hip drop tackle during the game, there's too many criteria that have to be met. We're just going to find the players afterwards in the game. We're not going to throw the flag during the game. And so then they say, well, now this gives us the opportunity to find the players for all these other hits that we decide we don't want to call during the game as well. I think it's BS. I think it's ridiculous, and I wish it would change. I'll ask you, we'll take any questions that any of the users have. We'll get to 1 or 2 questions real quick for Jordan before we let him go. But anything else, Jordan, that you've been hearing about the flow of the NFL, about injuries, or about players, teams, or coaches as we pass through that first month of the season, entering week 5, that you think some of our listeners might want to be aware of?
A couple things. I just reported a few minutes ago that Christian Watson is unlikely to head to IR, which is great news. That looked like a really significant ankle injury. It is a high ankle sprain, but the fact that he's not going to IR is wonderful, not only for the Packers, but obviously for fantasy managers as well. So that's huge. And I think, listen, if Green Bay is going to have the type of year that we think they can have, and you got a healthy Jordan Love and Dobbs and Wicks, who had a couple touchdowns, and obviously the tight ends, Musgrave and Kraft, I think Christian Watson is a huge part of that, as is Jaden Reed. This offense, the sky is the limit for them. And I give Matt LaFleur a tremendous amount of credit, especially for game planning the way he did against Tennessee, getting a couple wins, stealing a couple wins with Malik Willis, who played really well. And now you get Jordan Love back, and obviously Christian Watson again, only missing hopefully a couple weeks is a much better sign than it could have been for that offense. Obviously, Demarcus Lawrence goes to IR. Dallas is preparing as if they're not going to have Micah Parsons against, I believe it's Pittsburgh. So really good news that Parsons' injury is not more serious, but Demarcus Lawrence's injury is serious. He will miss at least 4 games. That's going to affect Dallas a lot on the defensive line.
There you go. I do want to bring up one quick question from George, who asks, I have serious concerns about the Bengals. What is the locker room vibe in Cincinnati? Do you have any insight into the Cincinnati Bengals here? They need to get things back on track. Obviously, that first win of the season down in Carolina certainly helped, but now they're hosting the Baltimore Ravens as home underdogs, and what's going to be obviously a very difficult game with the Ravens having lost a couple, winning the last 2 in dominant fashion over some high pedigree teams, and now looking to do the same in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think Cincinnati's okay. I only say that, first of all, there's only been one team in the last, I think, 3 decades to start 0-4 and make the playoffs. It was the 1992 Chargers with, I believe, Stan Humphries quarterbacking. When you have Joe Burrow, everything seems to fall into place. And I thought Jamar Chase for the last 2 weeks has looked tremendous. They're still figuring out what they want to do with those 2 running backs with Zach Moss and Chase Brown. But I thought Brown looked really good last week. Moss has looked good. Now they're getting T. Higgins back, who had his best game by far. They obviously got the tight end rolling with Gesicki. I still think defensively they need to solve some things with I call him the Big Lou, because I love Lou Anarumo. I always pronounce his name wrong. I think he's one of the premier DCs in the league. They were really exposed against Washington. They were better last week, but now you mentioned Baltimore coming in, who's hot. They've won 2 in a row, and to me, this is a really important 2 or 3 game stretch with Cincinnati. Because if they are going to salvage this season and get back to the playoffs, they really need to start figuring it out fast. I think they can go 9-5 down the stretch, and then they're good with 10 wins. But this is a really important time. But if anything, I'm a little more concerned about the defense. But I have so much faith in that defensive coordinator that they'll figure it out. And I thought, again, the offense has been really good for the last 2 weeks. They lose to Washington, but I don't think they punted in that game. And then last week they were really good as well. So I'm okay with Cincinnati right now.
All right, Jordan. Well, thank you for being so generous with your time. You guys can follow Jordan on Instagram at Jordan Schultz as well. And Jordan, you've got a show with Draymond Green. It's called Why is Draymond Green Talking About Football with Jordan Schultz? Why don't you tell us a little bit about that show?
Oh, so kind of you, Warren. And just to be fully clear, I am absolutely thrilled to be on. I love everything you do and would love to come on any other time. I think you do a tremendous job. So I appreciate the kind words. With Draymond, yeah, Draymond's a big NFL fan. He actually played freshman football a little bit at Michigan State. He's a big football fan. He's actually a Steeler fan, even though he's from Saginaw, Michigan. So it's been very fun. We've done a few shows, had some good guests. Joe Mixon. We had Patrick Surtain on. Got some good ones this week as well. It's going to be Thursdays, every Thursday before Thursday Night Football on Instagram Live. He's been great. And I don't know if you saw, but yesterday he had a little tiff with a reporter in the press conference. The reporter said, fans are concerned about you. He said, why? You don't need to be concerned about me. Of course, we'll be discussing that Thursday.
There you go. Well, that's awesome. You guys check that out this Thursday before Thursday Night Football on Instagram. Follow him at Jordan Schultz over there on Instagram. Thanks so much, Jordan. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Warren. Take care.
All right. Well, that was great. We're going to be trying to bring in some guests for you guys on this Tuesday show. The Friday show, we're giving out picks. We got our college bets. We've got our NFL bets. We've got our props segment. We'll get to some of those records soon. I've got another montage to show you. That means the show did pretty well and your pocketbooks are pretty flush, I am sure. Before we get to our next topic, though, we just reduced all the season-long pricing on Sharp Football Analysis if you're interested in getting involved. And we now are also giving you 20% off of those prices that we just reduced. Obviously, a quarter of the season is over. The first 4 weeks, prices get reduced on rest of season package. Here's 20% on top of that. So betting recommendations, analysis, fantasy football coverage, use the code SHOW20 to stack another 20% off on any of these products. Just go to sharp.football, click the link at the top, and choose the package that's right for you. We're off to a really strong season. We've set records for our profit that we have won for subscribers in consecutive years. 2022 was a record. Then we broke that in 2023. We are on pace, ahead of pace. We've never had this many units up through the first 4 weeks of the season in our history. So we're looking forward to see what happens the rest of the season. If you're interested, get involved there. Okay, now it's back to talking about another coach that I think is struggling with some of his play decision making and the way that he approaches the game. Even though he's got a lot of success, we had to give the hard pill to swallow, whatever that saying is about Mike Tomlin. He's obviously had a lot of success in Pittsburgh, but he's not perfect, and we can call things out when there are issues. Here's another coach the same way. Matt, why don't you intro us to the next topic? All right. Of the teams that are currently at or above 500 with a coaching staff that could be capping their ceiling, to me, the Bills are right there at the top of the list. The Jets are there. We talked about them with Robert Saleh and Nate Hackett. Antonio Pierce with the Raiders, they're 2-2. The Chicago Bears with Shane Waldron, they're 2-2. The Houston Texans with Bobby Sloak, I just mentioned them, they're 3-1. But at the top of the list, it's got to be the Bills with Sean McDermott, due to the amount of talent that's on this roster. So look at this tweet. I want to pull it up here, Matt. Why don't you show that? They're tied 0-0. It's 4th and 1 at their own 39, and the Bills go for it and easily gain the 3 yards that they need. Then they're losing 14-3. 4th and 1 at their own 39. Literally the exact same situation. And they punt. There's literally nothing different about this situation except for 2 factors which should make you more likely to go for it. Number 1, it's already worked once. Number 2, you're now losing 14-3. You've seen the Ravens take 2 drives and march down the field with ease to score a touchdown. The Ravens might continue to do that. You cannot afford to give them the ball down 14-3 and allow them to increase their lead, which, oh, by the way, the Ravens went 96 yards in 10 plays after you punted them the football because you didn't go for it on 4th and 1 at your own 39. And they scored another touchdown. And so now you're losing 21-3. It's decisions like these that show me that Sean McDermott just still doesn't get it. Remember when Sean McDermott was on the road versus Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in the playoffs, and he kicks that short field goal? I want to say it's like 4th and 3 from the 6-yard line or something along those lines. He comes out afterwards and said that it was a mistake. They needed to be a little bit more aggressive, and they were going to improve, and that wasn't going to happen again. How many years ago was that, right? And here he is on the road versus another offense that's good, that's completely owning his defense, and yet he is still making the same mistakes. And then there's the play calls on the other side. Buffalo comes out of the half. They score a touchdown on their opening drive. They get the ball back. They're down 21-10. They drive the ball to the Ravens' 44-yard line. If they score, they're cutting this game to 21-17, a one-score game. Everything that worked for them out the half, they decide to completely go off the rails. They try a flea flicker in traffic. Josh Allen gets killed. They fumble the football. Baltimore gets it back, easily goes down and scores another touchdown, 28-10, and basically the game is over. As good as Josh Allen is, I don't think he's going to get one with Sean McDermott. I'm sorry to say that. And we talk about this all the time as it relates to quarterbacks. It's time to talk about it as it relates to coaches as well. Sean McDermott is a purgatory coach. You know those purgatory quarterbacks. They're good enough to keep you in the playoff hunt year after year, but they're never good enough to actually go on a playoff run to the Super Bowl and win it. So your team will never win the ultimate goal, which is a Super Bowl, but you'll never sit there and say, let's go a different direction, because there's a chance that the quarterback that you bring in is actually going to be worse than the one that you already had. That's going to cost the GM and the head coach's job potentially. So you're not going to win, but yet you're not going to be picking top 3 in the draft to get a quarterback to get you out of purgatory. Well, that's Sean McDermott in a nutshell on the coaching side of things. Josh Allen is good enough to get you to the playoffs. He'll win enough games to get you to the playoffs. But once he's there, Sean McDermott is now going up against some of the best coaches in the NFL. And they are simply better at the game management, decision-making, philosophical side of things than he is. And forget about just the one-offs where he should have gone for it and didn't go for it. The general philosophy as well. When to be aggressive with your offense, when to dial it back. He's terrible there as well. So I just don't get it with Sean McDermott. It frustrates me year in and year out, game in, game out against big-time opponents. Josh Allen is spectacular, but he's not it. And as an aside, just before I get to some of your other questions here, which, by the way, you guys should go over to go to YouTube at Sharp Football Analysis. That's where you can follow the show. Make sure you like it. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you turn your alerts on. And you can ask your questions over there. I'll be getting to them and reading through some of your questions here in the live chat. We thank you for all of the support that you have shown over the very short time that we started up this show. As you can see, every single week, we're trying to improve and get a little bit better on the production side of things, on the hosting side of things, on the content side of things. And look, we're 1 minute to 1 o'clock, and I still got more stuff to go over with you. After this, we got to go into strength of schedule. I got some great graphics to share with you there. So make sure that you guys are asking some of your questions. But the one thing I do want to say is I had 3 bets that got totally burned by the ending of this game that were quite frustrating to me. So I had the Khalil Shakir receptions over. That one hits. I had Justice Hill receiving yards over. That one hits. I also have the game over at 46.5. I have Josh Allen's passing yards over and James Cook receiving yards over. Now, there's 11 minutes and 23 seconds left in the game. Just close your eyes. Think about this with me for a second. 11 minutes and 23 seconds left in the game. There's 45 points that's already been scored. You need 1 score of any kind. Josh Allen has 180 passing yards. He only needs 49 more passing yards. He's getting the ball back with 11 minutes and 23 seconds left in the game, down big. And James Cook only needs 9 receiving yards. If you told me that game state before I was to place any of these bets, I would gladly take Josh Allen over 228 passing yards. I would gladly take James Cook over 17.5 receiving yards. I would gladly take the game total over 45 in all 3 of those. But what ends up happening, because the game is such a one-sided blowout, because Sean McDermott wasn't aggressive enough, and then the play calling was idiotic there. You also had a missed field goal, which cost 3 points that would have hit the over. The rest of the game is Bills punt, Ravens punt, Bills pull the starters, then they punt, Ravens pull the starters, then they punt, And then the Bills just chew up the final 3 minutes of the game, down 35-10 with backups running the ball for nothing. We got 5 possessions that scored 0 points to end the game, and none of those bets end up cashing. And that's just the way that betting goes sometimes. But that was a brutal loss for those 3 that I felt great about at that situation in the game, and would place those bets every single time. So that one stunk. Let's go to a couple of your quick questions here, and then I want to get into the strength of schedule. By the way, it's a good time to talk about how last Friday's show went. So as you guys know, Friday's show, I got my college football expert, Ryan McChrystal, I got my NFL expert, Pam Maldonado, and then myself giving out multiple props throughout the show. But especially at the end, I always give out 2 props from the longest market, longest pass completion, longest rush, longest reception, overs or unders. Let's play the results of last week's show, Matt.
So if Alabama's favored, play the money line. If they're getting points, take the points against the spread. 2 big reasons. The first is Georgia's run game. And we saw it 2 weeks ago against Kentucky, where Kentucky really found a way to bottle them up. The second factor, and really the biggest factor why I'm on Alabama in this game, Georgia's lack of depth on defense. I think Kansas State bounces back in a big way in this matchup, for some of it being their ability to bounce back, some of it being Oklahoma State.
The prop that I like is Garrett Wilson under 55.5 receiving yards, because Denver's pass defense is top notch, second in yards allowed, and they've already shut down wide receiver ones in every game this season, Metcalf, Pickens, and Evans. I do like the Bengals and Panthers over 47. You're mentioning Andy Dalton, but I think it really starts and ends with the Panthers' defense. The Panthers are struggling in every aspect of the defensive side, so it's basically a big buffet opportunity for Joe Burrow. I'm not at all fearful to take such low totals, so Browns Raiders under 37. This could be more of a defensive slugfest, because in my professional opinion, the Raiders offense is pretty yuck. So now you have 2 ineffective offenses, 2 defenses that are licking their chops. That's a recipe for a low-scoring game.
Aaron Jones, longest rush, over 15.5 yards. Aaron Jones has hit a run of 19 or more yards in 2 of his first 3 games this season. He is on a stretch of hitting a 17-yard run or longer in 8 of his last 9 games played. We're going to go with the longest rush for Chase Brown, over 11.5. I have this Panthers run defense as one of the worst in the NFL. I have the Bengals as the #1 ranked rushing attack. All right, so there you go. That's just a sampling. That was from last week's show, where obviously we did extremely well sweeping the board for a number of us. And tune in this Friday. Set your alarm. Make sure you're following on YouTube. 12 noon Eastern every single Friday. We go live for an hour, sharing our bets with you, answering your questions, which I'm going to tune into now. And then we're going to get back into the strength of schedule discussion. I got some new graphics. Can't wait to share some of these with you. But first, let's go here to college football. We've won for 4 straight weeks now, I think, in college football. Ever since the NFL started, we have not had a losing week in college football as well. College football has been great as well for us here. Jason asks, which game has the biggest EDSR mismatch this week? So Jason has been following me. EDSR, early down success rate, custom analytic I created, basically looks at how often are you bypassing third downs. Extremely predictive for success, particularly in the playoffs. And it's not more predictive than turnover margin. Turnover margin still is the #1 biggest predictor of whether a team is going to win or lose a game. But being able to avoid third downs and being efficient on early downs is vital. So as we start looking ahead to week 5, one of the biggest matchup edges is and these are all updated numbers through last night's games. So there were 2 Monday Night Football games. I stayed up until 3 a.m. running all the numbers for you guys. We've got the Baltimore Ravens edge over the Cincinnati Bengals is the #1 matchup edge from an EDSR perspective. Baltimore has the #1 most efficient offense and the 10th best defense. The Cincinnati Bengals have the 14th best offense, but the 26th best defense in early down success rate. So that's a big one for you, Jason. Another one, and this one primarily is just based upon the fact that one team stinks defensively, and that's the San Francisco 49ers over the Arizona Cardinals. Simply because both offenses are basically evenly matched. One is #7 in EDSR offense. One is #4, the Cardinals, the 49ers. However, if you look at the other side of the ball, the defense of the 49ers is one of the better defenses in early downs, forcing teams into third down, number 3 best. Whereas the Arizona Cardinals offense is Arizona Cardinals defense is 31st. So that's a terrible one. We'll get to some more of these. Another mismatch here is in favor of actually the Minnesota Vikings, pretty strong against the New York Jets, where the Minnesota Vikings, number 9 offense and number 4 defense. The New York Jets, number 23 offense and number 13 defense. We will look in a moment. That's a great transition, but I'm going to hold it because I want to answer a couple more questions. Strength of schedule for the New York Jets. It's been brutal for this offense. They've played the number 1 toughest schedule of opposing defenses. So you have to consider schedule. This is the point in the calendar when I start really looking into consider the schedule that you have played as it relates to the understanding the context of the statistics that you've accrued year to date. Let's see. Drew asks, how are the Colts underdogs this week against a dysfunctional team like the Jacksonville Jaguars? Well, the funny thing about the Indianapolis Colts is we know that Anthony Richardson does not provide as much efficiency from a passing perspective, but he could be out there starting this game. And if he's out there starting this game and he's not 100% with his mobility, that's a big time problem for the Indianapolis Colts because that's really all he brings to the table. His completion rate is terrible. And I know Trevor Lawrence hasn't had a very strong completion rate either. I, for the life of me, don't understand why they don't just start throwing shorter passes underneath to help improve the overall efficiency of this offense. All they seem to want to do is just push the ball deep down the field. Trevor Lawrence's air yards per attempt, one of the highest in the NFL. Obviously, your completion rate is not going to be that great on those. The same is true with Anthony Richardson, but the difference is Lawrence is a bit more, well, I should say, a lot more efficient underneath when he passes underneath typically, whereas Anthony Richardson is very erratic. And so we don't know yet. It's only Tuesday at noon, well, 1 p.m. now. We don't know yet if Anthony Richardson is going to be out there or not. But if he isn't, then he's limited. It's not great for the Indianapolis Colts offense. We will get to a couple more of your questions. Andy Reid used to struggle with game management. Ian says he drove us Eagles fans crazy. I know that firsthand very well. And I absolutely think that you can improve in this regard. You can get better with your game management and your decision-making under pressure. You just have to focus on it. And Andy is one of those guys who changed his stripes, not that he's perfect now, but you should have seen what he used to be with Philadelphia. Ian's absolutely right. At a very late stage in his career, right? He's not a spring chicken. Okay. So a lot of these young coaches should be able to do this a little bit easier. They should be a little bit more open-minded, less convicted about their thoughts, more willing to adapt. And too many of them just still are not, in my opinion. So with that said, Matt, let's start going through some of these strength of schedule graphics. Throw up number 1. So like I said, I just ran the model with the strength of schedule year-to-date efficiency of opponents. And you can drop me from the corner there so we can see the graphic a little bit more. There you go. So let me minimize this so I can see a little bit better. Okay, at the top, what you're seeing is year-to-date defensive efficiency of opponents. So I just mentioned that the New York Jets offense has played the number 1 most difficult schedule of opposing defenses year-to-date. That's why they're up there. And the label on the right is actually incorrect. It's the most difficult at the top, the easiest at the bottom. And so that's where the red and the green is, if that shows up on your screen. So the Jets have played the number 1 most difficult schedule of opposing defenses. Now they're going to be playing a defense that ranks a little bit worse than average this upcoming week, which is what the bottom graphic shows you. The bottom graphic shows you future weeks all. That means we'll get to what it looks like in week 5 in a second. But for the rest of the season, the Jets' schedule of opposing defenses is actually going to be a little bit better than average. So that's one thing that's going their way for the future. If you look at the Dallas Cowboys are one of those teams. Now go back to the other one, Matt. Go back to the other one. Okay. The Dallas Cowboys, look at where they rank right now with regard to their schedule at the top and who they've played. Defensively, through the first 4 weeks of the season, they've played the 5th toughest schedule up at the top there. But look at the bottom graphic. Into the future schedule of their opposing defenses, they're going to play the number one easiest schedule of opposing defenses from week 5 onward. So now let's look at what that appears, Matt, in the next graphic, number 2. And you can see that difference. So the Dallas Cowboys, weeks 1 to 4, absolutely difficult schedule of opposing defenses. They play a difficult defense this week. Moving forward, beyond that, look at some of these defenses that are going to play. Life is going to get easier for this Dallas Cowboys offense. The offense is going to look better in the future. So that is going to be something that we're going to be paying attention to for the Dallas Cowboys. Not this week. Struggle on Sunday Night Football. They played the Pittsburgh Steelers. Dallas is actually catching 2.5 points on the road in that game against the Steelers defense that does rank 8th best in the NFL. Okay, Matt, let's go to the next graphic, number 3. And this is the year-to-date defensive efficiency of opponents versus week 5 efficiency of opponents for defenses. So once again, the top graphic is the same as what we looked at previously. What we're seeing here is that the Jets have played the toughest schedule of opposing defenses. The Arizona Cardinals have played the easiest schedule of opposing defenses. But now at the bottom, you're going to be able to see some of these teams that are going to this week face a different type of schedule. So where I want you to focus your eyes is where we have teams that are aligned very differently in terms of the top or bottom on that bottom week 5 graphic than where they are listed, and they're all in descending order in the top graphic. And the first one that jumps out to me, maybe it does to you as well, is look at the Green Bay Packers. If you're counting from left to right, they've played about the 7th toughest schedule of opposing defenses through the first 4 weeks of the season. And now they're going up against the Los Angeles Rams, one of the worst defenses in the NFL. You can see where they rank. They're one of the Cleveland Browns are going to play a defense that is ranked worse in terms of the Washington Commanders than the Los Angeles Rams. So that is going to be a big ease and improvement for the Green Bay Packers offense. We know that they've got Jordan Love back. He should be another week removed from that injury, feeling a little bit better probably. They're down Christian Watson, as Jordan mentioned, but they've got so many receivers. This is one position group. It's kind of like what I was talking to you guys about with regard to Austin Eckler last week for the Washington Commanders, where on the Friday show, I mentioned I'm really not that concerned that Austin Eckler is not there, because you don't necessarily need a guy like Austin Eckler to have success against a defense that doesn't bring pressure and doesn't blitz like the Arizona Cardinals don't. And I thought the Washington Commanders offense is going to have a ton of opportunities. I bet the over in the game. I liked the Washington Commanders offense last week. Well, Green Bay Packers, not having Christian Watson isn't great, but not having Christian Watson against the Rams defense, I think the Packers offense is still going to have a ton of opportunity for success. On the other side, look at a team like the Kansas City Chiefs or the Minnesota Vikings, who are going up against much more difficult defenses this week. Kansas City going up against the Saints after Kansas City played a slightly easier than average schedule of opposing defenses on the season. Now they're going up against the Saints, one of the most difficult defenses, best defenses in the league. And we'll see if Marshawn Lattimore is back for that game. You also have the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, they have played an easier than average schedule of opposing defenses. Now they're going up against the New York Jets. That's going to be an interesting challenge for Sam Darnold. The revenge game for Sam Darnold, obviously the former Jet, going to play Minnesota in London this upcoming week. Now let's go to another graphic, Matt. Let's go where are we at? Number 5. Number 4. Okay. Pass offense strength of schedule. So what I'm looking at here is the same approach year to date, weeks 1 to 4 versus week 5. But now we're looking at just the pass defenses. So this is for your quarterbacks in fantasy football, or this is for your understanding of passing attacks and quarterback efficiency year to date. The Denver Broncos have played the number 1 most difficult schedule of opposing pass defenses on the season. Now they're going to be going up against a slightly easier than average schedule opponent, and that is the Las Vegas Raiders. So think about who the Broncos have had to go up against so far this season. You know, they played that Seattle Seahawks, which didn't look quite as menacing against the Detroit Lions as Jared Goff went 18 of 18 and set a record. But that is a very difficult task for a rookie quarterback in his first start on the road in Lumen Field in Seattle to make. He obviously didn't perform great in that game. He hasn't performed great in his past couple of games, but might you forgive him a tiny bit for some of these defenses that he's been going up against? I think that I would. On the other hand, you've got a quarterback like Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. They have played the number one easiest schedule of NFL pass defenses by far. Look how far they are from number 31. They're down at number 32 there at the top graphic. Now they're going up against the Baltimore Ravens, who the Baltimore Ravens, that is their weak point, their pass defense. It is not great. It still is a little bit above the NFL average, right? The first couple of weeks, it looked worse than NFL average. They've since come back a little bit, and now they are a little bit above the NFL average. Once again, what you want to be focusing on here is for week 5, where is a team in the top graphic stacked very differently than they are in the bottom graphic. So a couple jump out to me. Obviously, you've got the Indianapolis Colts. They have played the 3rd toughest schedule of opposing pass defenses year to date. Now they're taking on one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL this upcoming week in the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, that Green Bay Packers team jumps out here as well, playing the worst pass defense in the NFL of the Los Angeles Rams here after playing a more difficult than average schedule. Teams that the reverse is true for, you've got the Minnesota Vikings. They are playing one of the most difficult pass defenses, the most difficult for any team this week after playing an easier than average schedule. And another thing that I'm noticing here, guys, that hopefully jumps out to you as well. Who's that team's second to easiest over there on the right year to date? The Cleveland Browns have played the second easiest schedule of pass defenses. Deshaun Watson has played the second easiest schedule of pass defenses this year. And look how horrible he has been playing. And that's against one of the easiest schedules in the NFL of opposing pass defenses. So that's not a great, Matt, if you can go to number 1, go all the way back to number 1. We'll jump back to sit 5 in a second. Go all the way to number 1 real quick if you can. Yeah, Cleveland. So if you see where Cleveland sits here, they're like 8th from the right. So that'll be 25th toughest schedule of defenses year to date. And they're going to be playing about a league average moving forward. But that pass defense schedule probably is going to not look nearly as good down the road if you isolate that out. Okay, let's jump all the way to number 5. Thanks for doing that, Matt. The Indianapolis Colts. I mentioned how the Colts' future schedule of pass defenses for week 5 is going to be so much easier than what it was year to date. Here's what it looks like on a graphic form if you just look at the Colts. See, it's pretty evident here. They've played 3 top 10 pass defenses on the season, and then the Green Bay Packers, which was not very good pass defense. Now they're going to be going up against the 30th ranked pass defense of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So this is the type of stuff that I do all the time over at Sharp Football Analysis. Run through all this stuff now early in the week. Prepare some things for my clients. This is how we're getting on some of the games. All right. Matt, let's go to number 6, defensive strength of schedule. So this is the exact opposite. We are looking at the offensive side of the ball for offenses, who their defenses that they're going to be facing. Now let's look at the reverse. Let's look at defenses and the offensive efficiency of opponents. So we look at the Arizona Cardinals. It's been a brutal schedule for the Arizona Cardinals so far this season in terms of the offenses that they face. So this defense probably isn't as bad as how they've shown, because you could see how much worse the schedule they've played than even the second team. The New England Patriots defense has gone up against a lot of great offenses so far to start the season, but look how much further the Arizona Cardinals sit above them in terms of schedule difficulty. So the Arizona Cardinals schedule has been brutal of opposing offenses. That defense probably not as bad as we think, but guess who they're playing this week? The San Francisco 49ers. So if you look at the bottom graphic for week 5, not much has changed, right? This team is still going to be playing a very difficult schedule. Meanwhile, a team like the New England Patriots, who played the second most difficult schedule of opposing offenses, now they are playing a much worse offense in the Miami Dolphins, which is just like shocking to say, but without Tua there, I mean, this is what the Miami Dolphins is. So I would expect this New England Patriots team to look a lot better in this game. Right now, that's why they are laying 1 point. In some spots, it's a pick 'em, but the New England Patriots sitting at 1-3 are actually favored, despite having Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, over whatever it is that the Miami Dolphins might be trotting out there behind center. look at a couple other teams. If you look at a team like let's go back to that. Let's go to the Raiders. Let's look at the Raiders for a second. The Raiders have been playing a easier schedule than average in terms of opposing offenses. Now they get a much easier, opposing offense as well here this upcoming week when the Raiders take on the Denver Broncos. Now, we know the Denver Broncos offense has played the most difficult schedule of defenses, so it's an interesting contrast there as to what the Raiders might look a little bit better, but the Broncos offense is probably a lot better than what we think that it is given their schedule that they've played. A team that's flipping the opposite direction is a team like the Cleveland Browns, who this defense has played the 7th easiest schedule of opposing offenses year to date. Now they're going to go up against the most difficult offense that any team is facing this week. And so that's the Washington Commanders. Now, is Washington really that good? Probably not. But it's going to be an interesting test for the Cleveland Browns, who have played an easier than average schedule. Now have to go up against Cliff Kingsbury. Cannot wait to watch that game. Matt, let's go to the final one from a schedule perspective. And this is the Houston Texans. Look at that future schedule of offenses. This is interesting because this defense under DeMeco Ryans, they've actually played an easier than average schedule of opponent offensive efficiency. You look at obviously the Chicago Bears, they got them week 2. You got the Jacksonville Jaguars last week. These are below average offenses. The Indianapolis Colts right around league average, and the Minnesota Vikings above average, of course. But it's not like they're a top 3-4 offense. I think they're probably a little bit better than 13. It might trend a little bit higher in my numbers as we go throughout the rest of the season. We shall see. But the bottom line here is that this is a big step up in class for DeMeco Ryans and this Houston Texans defense. And it's something that they haven't had a ton of success doing in the past, is making these step up. And this is why we're tying this all the way back, guys, to the very beginning of the show, where we are looking at who Bobby Slowick is, what his goal is with regard to this offense and how he's trying to call plays. And we know that the Houston Texans are going to be going up against this Buffalo Bills offense. It's the toughest offense that they have played. Will they try to play a little bit more aggressively on offense themselves with their play calling? Or will they still run the football at a 60% rate on 2nd and long, the highest run rate in the NFL, with the worst production on those runs of any team in the league, and find themselves in 3rd and 9.6 yards to go on average, which is the longest to go distance of any team in the NFL on 3rd down in the first half of games? They got to avoid that against the Buffalo Bills, especially that Buffalo Bills offense. Now, is the Buffalo Bills the 6th best offense? You can ask yourself that question as well with the way that they performed against the Baltimore Ravens. I don't think they made the proper adjustments. I just don't like the way that the Buffalo Bills are starting out these games. They are starting out the games with basically like a sprinkler approach to their offense. If anybody has like those rotating sprinklers in their yard, they're going to this guy, they're going to that guy. They're trying to get one touch to like every single player on their team. And they're like, okay, now we're good. Everybody's got a touch. Okay, now let's get into our offense. As opposed to just like, here's the weakness of this defense. Let's go after it from the get-go. Because you got to get leads in this league. You have to build leads quickly in this league. Make the opponent make them change up their philosophy. So that is that. Let's get to a couple of your questions here. Am I excited, Peter? Am I excited for the Stephon Diggs revenge game? Yeah, I am. I think it's going to be one of the best games of the weekend. We won't run through the whole betting board. I'll just call out some of these games, Matt. We don't have time. We're already way over. Buffalo right now is laying a point down in Houston. They're -1 favorites. Total sitting at 47 at most spots. Let's get to any of your other questions. Which undefeated team do I expect to fall next? That's a good question. What do we got here? The Minnesota Vikings or the Kansas City Chiefs? Those are the only 2 teams that are playing this week. Well, if you had to go by this, I would probably say that the Minnesota Vikings due to the spread. But actually, I got to dig into that Jets-Vikings game a little bit this week because I'm seeing something there that's kind of intriguing to me. I need to look a little bit more at some of the matchups. Okay, guys, we have run overboard this week. I didn't get to as many of your questions as I wanted to, but that's the way it goes. We're giving out too much information here. Be back on Friday for another episode of the Sharp Football Show. Make sure you're subscribed over at YouTube, 12 noon Eastern. We'll have multiple guests, give out multiple picks Friday. Go over to that YouTube channel, give it a follow, subscribe to it, hit the bell, whatever you need to do. We're growing this audience, and I'll keep doing these shows as long as you guys keep that interest level high, and we'll be bringing on more guests. So I'm really excited about the way that this show is heading. Use that coupon code SHOW20 if you want 20% off our newly reduced season-long prices over at Sharp Football Analysis. Catch you on Friday.